Hi, I'm Jenny K. Parks. I'm going to share with you my inspiration for this, and I'm going to try not to cry. Measure life, not in hours, nor in money, but in love. The first 2 months of 2023 were some of the most challenging in my life. My father-in-law left memory care at that time and spent the last few weeks of his life with us. My husband and I cared for and comforted him round the clock. We managed the visits with family members, nurses, aides, chaplains. Many times my wheelchair-bound mother-in-law sat beside him, praying and reading to him, habits they kept through much of their marriage. One day when my husband had just left and the room was quiet, he took a few last breaths and died. I was the only witness. I did not know this would be so hard. For those few weeks, we put everything on hold to love. It was our honor to measure that time in our lives, not in hours or in money, but in love. That is the inspiration for this pillow. So much of quilting is done from the heart. It's done as an expression of how we feel about something, how we care about the person that we're going to give it to. It's an expression of how we see the world. I'm going to share with you my method for fabric selections, how to make these blocks, and how to do this very cool hand embroidery. Don't forget to stay to the end because I'm also going to share with you the things that I would do differently next time. Cherrywood provided the fabrics for this whole project. I love Cherrywood Fabrics. I love them for the variety of color that you can get, that you can't get in other places, and I love how soft and wonderful they are, and they sew like butter. It's fantastic. If you have not actually tried Cherrywood and got your hands on some of this, next time you see it, grab some, just take it home and start working with it. You will fall in love. Red is often the color that we think of when we think of love. But I didn't want to just use red, and I didn't want to use something that was so strong. So I got the quilter's secret weapon, the color wheel. And if you want to know more, I've got lots of YouTube videos and a course that talks all about color and how color works for quilters. But we're going to take a little deep dive, and I'm going to show you how I picked colors for this project. Okay, so here we have red and green as its complement. I didn't want to go with just a really stark red. I wanted something that was a little softer and nicer, and I was thinking kind of raspberry or something along this lines. So I went into my Cherrywood stash and picked this color, and I think that's just gorgeous. It lines up so nicely with those there. And then I chose to use the opposite down here. Remember, the color wheel is inspiration. It's not a rule book. It's not a set of laws that you must follow. No, it is a source for you to help you decide, get ideas that you might not have had before. So if there's a color that you want that's not quite exactly, that's somewhere in the middle, that's fine. There's no way every color wheel could possibly have every color that's on there. So sometimes I'll scooch a little bit one way or the other. That's fine. Again, this is inspiration and ideas to help you. So there's my red, and I am such a huge fan of the variation of colors, right? Here you can see on this particular color wheel, I have the true hue, but I also have a range of colors, a much more light color all the way to a darker one. And that's what I wanted to match up. So I got these from my stash, from my lovely stash of Cherrywood Fabrics. I love how it goes from dark to light. Beautiful flow of color. I love it when it works like that. And then I picked the green on the other side. Now if I was going straight across, you get a kind of limey thing, but I really liked this green. It's so minty and nice. I really liked that. So I matched 4 other fabrics that would give us a nice fabric run. that would all go together beautifully. I always audition fabrics like this. I set them down and I see if they work together. Do these play together? Does it look nice? Do I need to get rid of one and keep the other? What do I need to do? With this collection, they are all singing beautifully in harmony. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Oh, I just love it. And you saw the results on the pillow. It looks so beautiful. For years, I've used EQ8 to help me design any quilting projects that I do because it takes care of the math, it helps, I could change size, I could do all kinds of stuff with it. I have a full video on that talking about EQ as an introduction, so if you want more information about that, be sure to check that one out. Here you can see I can go in and I can select the layout. I can add more blocks. I can change the size of any of these blocks. I can add more borders. And there's all kinds of things that I could do with design to make it exactly the way I want. See, there's an example. I'm going to switch it back now to the first one so I can show you how I use this for foundation piecing. Foundation piecing means that you secure the fabric patches onto some sort of foundation. It can be cloth, it can be paper, it can be printed, whatever. And sometimes it's removed, like in English paper piecing or freezer paper piecing. And sometimes if it's fabric, then it just stays in. This time we're going to be using printable foundation paper. Let me show you what I have and why I love it. ThermoWeb sent me a bunch of these to try and I am loving it. It's the Stitch and Sew Foundation Piecing Stabilizer. You can print on it, sew on it. It's super easy to rip out and I love it. So here are samples of how they're printed, but let me show you really how easy that is to do in EQ. So here we go, and I'm in the print section. I've set up my printer and make sure you've got it in the right place. And what I want here, I'm going to select a block and I want the foundation. Voila! You can change the number and do all those things. We are not going to worry about it at this time. And I want to see the colors in there. That's going to help me a whole heck of a lot. So let's preview that. Here is what it's going to look like. I want to scoot one of these over. So I'm going to grab this, move that over there, grab the second one, move that over there, and then we're going to be ready to go. All you need to do is load the stabilizer into the manual feed of your printer. I would of course suggest doing a test just to be sure and making sure that your printer will accommodate it, but it should work just fine. And there we go, super easy. To get started, you need your printed foundations, and it is really helpful to have your patches cut ahead of time. You see how it's labeled D1, D2, D3. It's like sewing by number. Patch number 1, lay it in place. Make sure you're covering up these lines. That's the stitching line. We want those to be covered, and the outside edges, because that's our 1/4 inch seam allowance. We want that all covered. Let's put a nice flat pin in. This just holds everything in place while we line up the next one. D2 is next. And here is the fabric patch that needs to go on there. So I place this over that, making sure everything is covered. Then I flip it over and line it up here. And I like to take a peek and make sure everything's covering that stitching line. And it is. Yay! And then I put another pin in place. I do not put a pin across here, because that will cover up the stitching line and I'll have to move it in the middle. I'd rather not do that. I want to just be able to stitch everything. Then I will take it over to the machine and stitch right along that line. And I'm going to stitch along this stitching line. Be sure to start before the 1/4 inch seam allowance and finish after. And you notice I am using bright orange thread. You do not need to do that. Next, we're going to trim away anything that might be left over in the seam allowance. remove the pins, and then you take this fancy ruler, which I love my add a quarter ruler, and we fold that back on the stitching line, and then rotate the ruler around. Oops. And if there's any bit hanging over, we'll trim that off. Now we're going to press this. And here we're going to add, next we'll add this last piece. We'll use the same method we did before. I said I always place it once just to make sure it's going to cover everything, and then flip it over and align it as best you can with that seam allowance in mind. Put a pin in. And we go stitch. There's my 1/4 inch mark, but I want to stitch beyond that on both of them. Same thing before. Let's trim away, make sure everything extra is out of the way here. Fold everything back on that stitching line. Swap the ruler around. And oh, I'm looking pretty good. And if you're in the market for a new rotary cutting surface, you cannot go wrong with Big Mat rotary cutting surface. That is what I use. They provided the mat for this video. I use their stuff all the time. I love it. So I have links. Be sure to check it out. Now we press. Now that this portion of the block is complete, we can trim away the extra. After all the blocks are sewn together, then you would remove the paper. But I'm going to show you that now, just so you get an idea of how you would do it. So I like to fold a little bit. I'll hold one corner here, and you just start to pull. I do it here. And then that leaves the center bit open. Yep. And if there's still a little bit, sometimes I will take scissors and cut just that little bit, because I know that maybe pulling too much, if I get too aggressive, it's going to pull out the stitching, and I don't want to do that. Was that not impressive? Oh my goodness. All right, I am all about being honest, and that's what my things at the end are going to be, but I pulled out some of these stitches. Usually that doesn't happen. I'm not exactly sure why it happened this time, maybe because everything wasn't stabilized, but you get the idea. Next is the hand embroidery for the letters. Now, my grandmother taught me how to embroider, and I really like that it is kind of making a little comeback. It's a chance to sit down and add your own very personal touches to any project. So I love that. First, I'm going to show you the basics that you'll need, and then I'll take you through how to transfer the lettering, because I have kind of a unique process. First, what you're going to need are needles. I would get an assortment size of high quality needles. This is a great bunch. we're gonna have to use yarn and thread, so having an assortment to choose from is a bonus. You will need a thimble. I like this style of hoop. It has a little ridge that catches on each other so that it holds the fabric more securely while you're working. I use these scissors just to take little snips when you need to cut that little bit of thread. I have it on a lariat, and then when I sit down to work, it just goes around my neck. Now, embroidery thread is almost always color fast, but you can also take a snip of it and with the yarn and test it in hot water to see if it bleeds at all. But it's very important that you use color fast items. This yarn is acrylic. That means it should not shrink and it should not bleed, but it is always a good idea to test in a little bit of hot water just to make sure. To transfer the lettering, you need a printout of the lettering. I like to have a cardboard that's underneath, just for stability. A fine point permanent marker. And for my technique, tulle. That very fine netting that you can get. Put the tulle across your lettering. Hold it securely. And then we simply trace over the lettering. There. Once you've determined the placement, now we need to transfer onto the fabric itself. I have been using these friction pens and it's been working really well for me. I also chose a color that even if all of the marker doesn't come off, that it's gonna blend with the burgundy that I have. And now just trace the line that you did before. Again, I'm holding everything securely, but of course you could tape it down. I'm going to load this into the hoop. There, it's nice and taut and secure. Now we need to get our thread and yarn ready. Because this is a large thread, we're going to need a needle with a very large eye to accommodate that. This is my best trick for threading needles. Loop the thread or yarn over one finger. Slide the eye of that needle underneath the thread and put one finger on top to secure it. Then reach in and grab all of the thread that's underneath, holding that needle in place. Slide the needle out. Now with the eye, you can wiggle it over the top and pull the thread in. If it will not thread through in this method, your thread and your needle are not matched. You need to adjust the size of the eye of your needle. For couching, the yarn is laid over the top and it's secured with the thread. With embroidery, we typically don't knot underneath. That can cause other problems. It can make things bumpy or create shadows. What we do is we secure the tail as we stitch along. So let me show you. Here we come up, and I'm just going to come up right in the middle. You can choose if you want to draw just one line and go around, or however you want to do it. I'm going to go up right in the middle. And I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail on the back side. And I'm going to kind of with my fingers hold it over where I know I'm going to stitch with the next one. So you see it's tucked up right under there. Now I put the other yarn into place. I do the same thing. I'm going to come up at about the same spot. But not right, just close, but not right next to each other. And leave a little bit of a tail. as I'm working, I will hold these two kind of together and they'll be secured as we go along. Take your yarn and hold it, kind of draping it over where you want it to go. That's the line we want. And sometimes I'll take the whole thing and put it over there. Might secure it in there or put it in a pincushion, something like that. Now with this yarn, we want to secure our couching yarn into place. So I'll make a stitch right next to it and just start there. Now come up on the other side, kind of close. Try not to go through the yarn, but just right next to it. And then on the other side. And since I know the tails have not been secured yet, I'm going to peek at the back and make sure my next stitch kind of loops around them, like so. And going back and forth like that is really the only way to do it. Now I also adjust my yarn at this point, kind of holding it securely with the top fingers. You always gotta check, you gotta have enough fingers to do this. Come up a little further. See, I'm doing about 1/4 inch. You could do it as close together as you want or as far apart as you want. I have chosen here to a thread that matches this color exactly. I debated using a green thread or a variegated thread or something, and I thought this looked better. So, but the choice is yours. So you continue to work until all the lettering is complete. And occasionally I adjust the yarn so that I get the appearance that I want here. Couching is a great option to use if you have that larger thread that you want to create the decoration with. To finish, we would do the same technique at burying our threads. We'll just say this is going to be the end here. I'll show you how we finish properly. I take the yarn, the big thread, to the bottom. And underneath, we kind of wrap it around a couple of stitches. Be careful not to loop everything else. Oh my mercy. There we go. Just a little bit, a few times around so it doesn't come unraveled. And then snip. The same thing with this one. I'm going to do just a couple more stitches so it looks like a nice complete line. Now that I'm underneath, I do the same thing. And just loop it around a couple times. And this little extra fluff, I can trim that away. And then trim this away. And it should stay just fine for what we're doing. All right, everybody, I'm going to jump in here with this picture. This is an image from when I was constructing the actual pillow top. And I want you to see some of the things that I did to modify it for use in the pillow and to better put the pillow together. Notice first that you see that white fabric that's at the top and a blue basting stitches. What I did on the back of the pink to better stabilize it for the embroidery is I ended up stitching through 2 layers, the light pink, and I basted a layer of the white onto the back. I felt like it helped it to be a little more stable and would be better for my purposes of presentation. And so that's an option. If you're working with something that you don't necessarily feel is going to be really stable, or you're afraid of shadows and whatnot coming through, basting another fabric underneath and stitching through both layers is a really good way to do it. The other thing too, if you are working with a small strip, like you've seen me today working with that small strip, you can either put it into the project that you're going to have it in, like you see here on this pillow, or you could baste strips onto the outside of it in order to stabilize everything. Those are also two options, but I just wanted you to see that those are possibilities. Also, you can see that purple line that I had there. That is to show me what was a good line to line up everything on, right? So my wording wasn't going up or down or crazy or whatever. And those again are the same thing, drawn with those erasable markers, and it worked really well. I'm very pleased with how that turned out. To remove the ink, once everything is complete, take an iron and just go over it real nicely. See, it just disappears beautifully. I absolutely believe that every project is a learning project. Every project you take on has something to teach you. And there are a couple things that I learned with this project, and I want to tell you what they are. Here's what I learned. I skipped a step. Reds and other really saturated strong colors can bleed. And Cherrywood strongly encourages everyone to pre-wash with Synthrapol. Synthrapol helps suspend extra dye in the water and wash it down the drain, not on the fabric next to it. Now, I have never had that bleeding happen before, but next time I will not skip that step. The next thing I would change has to do with the design. Now, when this pillow is sitting on the couch, these words are harder to read, and I didn't think about that. I think next time I would make these a little smaller, add an extra border here so that the words would be very obvious across this part. But that's for next time. Adding hand embroidery to your quilting projects can be a wonderful expression of your personal creativity. And remember, you're the designer. However you make it, that's how it's supposed to be. And I can't wait to see what you create. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.